Hi, this is James Markley. I'm here with Andre Schatzberg, same guy who was here last week. Notice he hasn't changed at all. But I got a new guy here. I got David Campman here with me. He's our senior project engineer and also one of our cyber cats here at Data Tech. So we want to talk to you guys a little bit today about backup and disaster recovery and kind of follow on from where we left off last week. We mentioned that we've unplugged it that we were going to be talking about this week. So I'm just going to throw one word out there and it's going to make these guys start thinking. Backup and disaster recovery as it relates to ransomware.
All right, so yeah, you're right. That you just tossed that lure out there. So when it comes right down to it, every company these days, one of the biggest fears that they have is what happens when my data gets compromised. What happens when all of a sudden I come to work the next day and I can't log into my servers? My employees can't access a database that they're used to working on every day because it's been compromised. It's been encrypted. It's been locked. There's no way to get that data out of that. There's no way to retrieve any of that information. What do you do then? Well, hopefully you have had a plan in place that you've been able to take regular, consistent backups that are healthy, that are viable for restoration purposes, and within 2-3 hours time tops, you're able to get back up and running. Everything is back and connected. Your data is safe and secure. You don't have any problems, and you did not have to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to try to get that data back that you probably won't get back because paying a ransom is actually unreliable. And you don't have to do any sort of press release that says, sorry, the data that we had was compromised and we couldn't get it back. We're going to go ahead and close up shop now. So obviously, having something like data backup and recovery in place is going to save you from the worst of the worst headaches and, of course, the worst outcome of not even having a business to run it.
The other thing I'll add to that is having the necessary hardware in place to have a business continuity solution. One of the things that we see a lot is even though you have your backups, you may have access to those files and that data, but you sometimes need to stand up another server or another application in order to be able to gain access to that data. Having that other hardware on site gives you that BC solution so that you can stand up those instances of those virtual machines, or even if you had physical machines with the backup data, stand it up in that hardware and kind of get yourself back up and going again. So.
I think the one thing that, there's been this huge push for cloud and, put everything in the cloud, which is a really good idea in terms of, you don't have to worry about the capital expenditure and everything else. But I think the one thing that a lot of business continuity side of it that people don't take into account is it's great when there's services like Carbonite and there's things where you can store stuff in OneDrive and everything else. But, what's the reality, in terms of pulling that data back down? I know we've had clients that we've even brought on that have been backing up to Carbonite. And, but the thought process then is, okay, so I backed up my server infrastructure to Carbonite. Now what's going to happen when I have to pull that down over, let's say, a 50 meg fiber connection to receive the whole server?
And there's a little bit more to it. So you look at things, you mentioned things like Carbonite. Carbonite is file and folder restore.
Right.
So yes, if you have Excel documents, Word documents, you have all these documents that on a daily basis you're adding information to and updating, and you have it syncing to something like OneDrive, or you have it being backed up with Carbonite, it's going to be safe. You're going to be able to pull from it. However, that's only going to save you in the instance that you lose a file or a file becomes corrupted. What happens when your entire server is compromised with malware and you don't have an option to just restore folders? You now have to restore an entire system. Having that infrastructure on site to be able to virtualize, which is the easiest and quickest, definitely helps out. I remember one client that we had, I came in the morning, 7:30 I get here, and the first thing I'm hit with is this client has 3 servers down because of malware. Completely been encrypted to the point where you log into Windows, nothing can really run. Within about an hour and a half to 2 hours time, we had identified what servers were hit explicitly and needed to be completely restored. We knew that they had a Hyper-V host server that we could restore to, and we used the backup system in place to be able to virtualize and restore those servers back to the cleanest point in time before the malware hit the system. Right. Having that in place allows you to get back on track that quickly, as opposed to file and folder, which, yes, you could reload Windows, you could get all the applications on there and everything licensed in about maybe 5 hours after you've applied all of the updates and patches. Then you're going to go ahead and pull down all of that data again and make sure that everything's in place with the permissions. It's a major headache trying to piece it all together afterwards.
I think and I think the other part too is that, when you talk about our client size, we have everything from 250, 300 plus endpoints all the way through to clients that have no endpoints at all. They're just clients that have 2 or 3 employees total in the company. And I think it's integral to have a good IT partner. When you mention virtualization, that can take that backup, whether it's an offsite backup that we have here in our data center or stored somewhere in our co-location, or take that backup that you maybe have on an external device back at your office and load that onto some type of equipment. I know we provide loaner equipment for disaster recovery, things like that, and just be able to load that up and get you back up and running so that we can figure out that initial one.
Right.
And I think that's something that really, from an IT partner perspective, is your IT partner, hopefully it's Data Tech, but if it's not, is your IT partner actually providing those solutions to you? Because that's integral. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not about whether or not you can recover from the backup. I mean, that's great, you need to, but you need to be able to recover your business and be back up and running as soon as you can.
Well, that's kind of where MTTO and RTTO come into play, right? How much data did you lose from being down, and how long did it take you to get back to that data at that point in time? And I think that's very crucial for a lot of our clients to make sure that they can recover as fast, as close to the time of impact to their data. And that's one of the things with the technologies that we deploy, we're pretty solid on that. I mean, what's restore time for you average? What with the one client that had the 3 or 4 servers down?
Restore time, and I can actually even tell you from testing, I've been able to pull restore times generally within an average of 30 minutes to an hour. And a lot of times if it's an hour, it's because there's some complication that's tripped things up. However, general smooth restores, I've been able to narrow it down to 20 minutes on critical servers.
So 20, 30 minutes for a restore, but how close to the time of impact can you get to recovering their data?
It depends on the configuration of the backup jobs and how often you want them to run. There are obviously some servers, say file servers, where you're going to have them running maybe on the hour every hour to make sure it captures up-to-date data. So you maybe lose an hour's worth of data. SQL servers, where you're going to have a lot of data changes, you want to try to do about the same thing. Something like a domain controller, where you don't really have a lot of data change on it, you could probably run it a few times a day, and if you had to restore, say, 3 hours back, you're not losing any data. It has everything it still needs.
I think one of the most interesting use cases, and David's been part of some of our ransomware response, was we actually had a client who got hit with ransomware. They were doing file and folder level backup. The ransomware, we had put some tools in place to go ahead and remediate that, but they ended up having some external security holes that they had some developers accessing through, and they put some more ransomware on the network. In the process, this client came to us because they had ransomware on their network, and we actually had to clean it off. And one of the most interesting things was, I think we were about, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks into the relationship, and they actually had to do a full server restore just from that ransomware that made its way onto its network. And we actually had an image-based backup from the rebuild we had done for them versus the file folder level.
Right.
I think we had a backup and running in like 2 or 3 hours.
It was very quick. Yeah, it was very quick.
Yeah.
And we had the backup and running on our hardware.
Yeah.
We had a solution that we brought in. It was a disaster recovery box, purpose built specifically to run their line of business application and that virtual machine. And within, I think maybe within half an hour, we actually had that server back up and running. So.
Right. I know that we talked, Andre, you were mentioning image-based backups and file and folder level. Some of our people that may be watching this don't necessarily understand file and folder level. I'm going to gloss over to high level, and you can jump in if I'm wrong. File and folder level really is just taking those initial files and folders that you have, backing those up somewhere. It's like basically taking like a drag and drop instance of those files. It may happen on a frequent basis, once every hour. It could happen once a day. It could, whatever the basis is for that. But then we have an image-based backup. The difference is that that's actually a backup of the entire system as system state as it stands. So let's say you have a server. It's the entire system as it exactly stands at that given point.
Well, and what's great about that, though, is that it's 2 in 1.
Right.
So if you're doing an image level backup, not only can you utilize it in order to bring an entire system back from whatever state it was in, but at the same time, should you have a user that deletes a folder, or you have a database that for whatever gets corrupt, we can mount the image, go directly into the image, and pull that data back up and restore it just the same. So really, you cover yourself two separate ways when you do something that's image level versus file and folder, where you can get your data back, but it's going to take longer if we have to reestablish an entire system.
So I think the takeaway, just right off the bat, would be that they need to go. If you're going with a backup solution, it has to be image based.
I would definitely
there's
suggest that.
doing a folder level, file folder level backup in an enterprise scenario, small medium sized business, just isn't going to work. Maybe if you're talking about your own personal stuff at home and you have pictures you're saving, things like that, not a big deal. But
well, then we get a lot of clients that they have workstations where you may have documents that are being worked on locally. And obviously there are solutions to try to remediate that, whether it's folder redirection to make sure that that data is going back to a server rather than being saved locally on the system. We do have some clients that they may not actually have a server in place. So what they do is have maybe 5 workstations. Well, we can offer backup solutions that can actually do full image level backups to cloud storage, so that not only can we still do file and folder restores, but if that workstation goes down, we can actually restore it from the cloud saved data image level and have it back up and going within a few hours.
Right. I think the other thing too that we don't typically think of, we talk about ransomware a lot, and I know that we always want to think of natural disasters and things like that. A hurricane comes, oh, there's a fire in my building and things. More often than not, though, I'm finding out that the reasons that people have a backup and DR plan isn't because there was a fire in the building. It's because there was a fire in one part of the building and their fire sprinkler went off and it nuked all their IT hardware. It's because there was a power surge and it knocked everything off and they didn't have it plugged into the right power equipment. So it's really like this whole holistic approach to the entire infrastructure, and then kind of looking at it and saying, okay, it's great because we can always sit there and say, well, if a hurricane comes, I'm going to unplug my server, I'm going to leave.
Right.
Well, one thing that we do see in Florida is DR sites because of that very reason. Some for central United States, maybe not as important, but I will say in Florida, there is kind of a concern here, specifically in the coastal areas.
Every summer.
Yep. So we do implement DR sites for that very reason, but there's again complete infrastructure set up either in the cloud or at another site where we have direct access to do it.
Right. I think that when we think about it, they always think, and I know I've walked into this numerous times, not just with clients, but prospective clients. I have friends too that have told me the same thing. That if something ever happened, they're just going to take their stuff and they're going to leave.
Right.
I'm just going to take. I have everything in this box, and if a hurricane comes, it's like when you're at home. I have everything in this box, and if a hurricane comes, I'm going to take my box. I'm going to get out of town.
Yeah.
But that scenario doesn't work in a business.
And you save yourself a lot of headaches when you plan on separate levels. So you have your local backups that you can pull from for very quick restores, whether it be file or folder or full system restores. You have offsite replication, so that should anything happen to your site locally, your systems, anything physically get destroyed, your data is saved offsite somewhere else.
Right.
The other option, which not many people do, but it's actually a very good idea, is cold storage. And this is something that is more so in terms of archival, which is very separate from backups. We get a lot of clients that they have to follow certain rules and regulations. They have to keep data backups for X amount of years. Well, you may not want your primary backup server holding 10 years worth of backup data, so you have a secondary cold storage offline server that you archive to on an annual basis. So having these levels in place really kind of helps to cover you in multiple different ways.
Right. I think the other thing is that, as we talked about, people taking their box and just kind of getting out of Dodge, we don't really think about the ramifications of that, in terms of what is the business impact on operations if something was to happen in a backup and DR scenario, whether that's, total downtime because you had to get out of Dodge with your box, or because you came back and realized you had a backup and DR issue. I read a study once, and it was from Sophos, one of our partners actually put it out, and it said that I think it was 55% of small businesses don't recover from a breach, any form of breach, or a security breach, or just a backup DR issue within the first 6 months.
Yeah.
And then within the first year, within a year following that, 85% of small businesses actually failed. So it's interesting to me as we've talked to clients. I know one of our things is we've gone out and helped recover from ransomware for clients. When you really add up the bills on it for a business, and they like to say it's all $50,000 to recover. It really is. It's $50,000 to recover from these things sometimes, and the investment on the backup side is so minimal.
Yeah.
That's the thing is that we see time and time again our clients come to us after they've invested that 50 or 60 or even one of the clients this year $100,000. And now we're implementing a backup solution for them. We're implementing a BUDR solution for them. And it's unfortunate that it's not out in the open and not out in front. I mean, security first, yes.
Right.
But when your security gets breached, which it will, it happens, you need to make sure that you have these backups.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think for the low entry point for backup and disaster recovery, it seems like it's a very large amount when you're not currently doing it.
Right.
But for as far as when you talk about what it's going to cost on a regular basis to be proactive in that and to say, okay, let me get something in place. It's definitely, if you're not looking at it right now, you need to be looking at it right now because
you both have car insurance, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
It's
Same
insurance.
backup insurance. So.
Exactly.
Anyways, I appreciate you guys joining us today. I'm sure David and Andre enjoyed it. This was really David's first rodeo at this, so we were giving a little pep talk before we started.
Yes.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday.